Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Psychology of the Batman. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. Instead of doing a scripted commentary, I'm kind of just going to freewheel it and see how it goes. I found this movie to be very interesting in a psychological sense. It seems like they took a different stance on this type of Batman as opposed to some of the past versions of it. One of the things I saw in this movie primarily was the dichotomy between the Batman as the persona and Bruce Wayne, who in this movie seems to be playing the role of the shadow. So in the early scene, we see Batman. He's kind of telling us about who he is, an introduction to everything. And he's looking for targets very carefully. He seems to be hunting people, but he's hunting out of a vengeance, and that's the word that they use a lot for his title in this movie. The thing you'll notice is a lot of these people that he's going after in this early part of the film are small-time criminals. Basically just people causing disruptions in the city, taggers and people assaulting others, nothing really big. I would say that at this point, Batman is in the position of meeting his own psychological needs as opposed to the needs of people around him. He seems to be attacking individuals primarily based on his own past hurt and pain. And this is a theme that runs throughout the movie. It's a theme that actually runs through all Batmans, is that the trauma of his childhood is what is spurring him on. And we see this very much so in this movie, where it seems like Batman is being psychologically driven in an unconscious way towards vengeance. He's trying to get vengeance for his parents being killed, and he's not realizing the impact that's having on him and on the people around him. One of the things I noticed in that early scene is the man who's saved by Batman, and he's saved from the thugs about to beat him down, and he's actually scared of Batman, and he doesn't want any part of Batman. And this is a problem because we're seeing how Batman is a bully to basically everybody in the city, and nobody sees him as a savior necessarily. None of the cops like him. Basically, Gordon's the only one on the Batman side. Everybody else kind of sees him as a thug himself. And this is one of the problems with somebody who's seeking out vengeance, is that he is not aligned to the good of the city for the most part. People see him as other than them. So as far as the persona versus shadow thing going on in this movie, we see in one of the early scenes he's talking to Alfred, and Alfred wants Bruce Wayne to go out and start meeting with people and to, be in the community again, and Wayne's very opposed to this. We're seeing how Wayne is embarrassed of his own life and his own family. He doesn't like who he is really, and so it seems like Batman has become his way of escaping his own reality. And so that's why we can look at the Batman and the person in the suit as the persona. That's like the social role that he's basically playing. It's a way for him to kind of cut himself off from who he is as a totality. And Bruce Wayne is basically not even a person in this version of the Batman story. He's non-existent. He doesn't go out. He doesn't spend time with people. Even when he's not dressed as the Batman, he's still wearing the Batman makeup a lot, which shows how ingrained he is in that persona role. And it's very much that Bruce Wayne is the shadow, not only because the shadow is a part of yourself that you're not looking at, it's a part of yourself that you're kind of ignoring and you would rather not pay attention to. But there's a lot of darkness in his past, not only for himself, but as the movie goes on, we see how much darkness there is in his family as well. and a lot of things that he never knew about his family and issues that were kind of covered up. And so it really makes sense that Wayne is that shadow part of himself. And the problem with that is the shadow needs to be incorporated. It needs to be integrated, or you're always going to be a disjointed individual. And I think that's what we're seeing in the early part of the film, where he is not a complete person by any sense of the word. You can think of Bruce Wayne as being somebody who's atrophied and limp. He's sort of flaccid, while all the energy and effort is put into the persona of the Batman. But the Batman cannot form relationships with people. It can't let people know who he really is. He just can't. I mean, he can't take off his mask, right? He's stuck in that persona, and it leads to a partial existence, and it doesn't seem like a life that he really enjoys living at all. Later in the film, we see Bruce making a public appearance at the funeral for the mayor, I believe, and it looks like he's just forgotten what it's like to be a real person in society. He arrives, everyone wants to talk to him, but he can barely allow himself to look at the reporters. He soon hears a man talking about how his family fell through the cracks, and you see how embarrassed Wayne is by this. It's just like there's constant reminders for Bruce of how his family has basically failed the city, and how he really has failed the city in terms of continuing to try to help out and be a philanthropist and aid people that are in need. And the mayoral candidate even mentions that he hasn't contributed anything for a while, and it's just, all this stuff glaring him in the face about how his real person, Bruce Wayne, has not really done much. One of the most pivotal scenes in the film is after Alfred's been nearly blown to death and he's in the hospital, and you hear this quote from Wayne saying, "God, I never thought I'd feel like that again. I thought I'd mastered all that." And so the thing that he's talking about there is how he is still being controlled by fear of losing other people he cares about. And he mentions this, but it's this, starting to become conscious of how his unconscious fears have been driving him for so long. And he's really been spending a lot of time and energy pushing people away. He's actively trying not to allow people to get close to him, and that's not only hurting himself, but it's hurting everybody around him. And you actually see Alfred seems to be pretty hurt in this scene because he wants a closer relationship with Wayne, and Wayne is not willing to give it to him. And so you see him really starting to become conscious here of what he's been doing and how he's been unconsciously driven, and realizing that the only way he can form relationships with people and that he can get closer to people, which not only means personal relationships but also helping the community, is if he starts to allow himself the opportunity to be hurt again. And so he needs to be vulnerable, basically, and he needs to allow that to be a possibility for him to live a fuller life. And that's only going to happen through Bruce Wayne and not through the Batman. And it's going to be a tough thing to do. So we next see a scene when Selina is on the rooftop and she's about to kill one of the police officers who worked at the club for Falcone. And she basically just wants to kill this guy because her friend's dead. She's looking for vengeance. She's completely concerned with her own life and her own pain. But Batman, or Wayne, is at that time when he's starting to realize that you can't just kill everybody just because they did something bad, and that you have to differentiate and that you have to discriminate between people that you attack or kill, or that you serve any type of vengeance or justice to. And that is really the difference that he's starting to come to right there, is he's moving from becoming vengeance to justice. He's becoming somebody who is trying to be more just, who's trying to be more fair in the way that he handles things. And he decides to save the man from death, even though Catwoman or Selina tried to basically knock him off the roof. And it seems like that invigorates him and gives him a new type of purpose going forward in the rest of the film. I thought that character of the Riddler was very interesting, kind of serving as a mirror to Batman. And a lot of these puzzles seem to be a way for Batman or Bruce Wayne to look closer at his own life and to look at the shadow or the Wayne personality that he's been ignoring for so long, and to really like take a deep look at things and to see what his life has been about. And so it's a really interesting way of using a villain as a way for a hero to know himself better. Riddler eventually talks to him about Wayne being an orphan, or being a fake orphan essentially, when real orphans were struggling to survive. And it's just another part of Wayne's life that he's ashamed of and he can't look at, and probably something that he wanted to forget about for a very long time. So he's with Riddler in this room, locked there, and he's just realizing he can't keep running from this past anymore. And he needs to look at his past a little bit harder and a little bit closer and integrate that into who he is. And that really just means owning up to mistakes, owning up to past faults, whether they're yours or somebody else's, and correcting it and developing that inferior part of your personality to make you stronger as a whole. This made me think of a Carl Jung quote that I had read recently, and it's from Psychology and Religion. And it says, "If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all these projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he is now unable to say that they do this or that, they are wrong, and they must be fought against. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in himself, and if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world." And it just totally makes me think of this character and what's going on here, and that he's basically saying, I can't blame this on anybody else anymore. I have to just take all responsibility for myself, and I'm actually part of the problem. And if I can correct some of these things, maybe I won't be part of the problem anymore, and maybe I'll be part of the solution. The Riddler ends up saying a line where he says, "All everyone wants to do is unmask you, but they're missing the point. This is the real you." And this is the part that Riddler and Batman kind of take two separate roads. It seemed like Riddler thought they were on the same path, and this is the problem with Riddler's understanding of things, is that he is depending on the persona. That's all he is the persona of the Riddler. The rest of him is just trash, basically. You could just throw the rest of who that person is out, because it's just, there's nothing there, and he doesn't want anything to be there. The persona is all that benefits Riddler. But Wayne does not want to get rid of Wayne. He's just struggling with Wayne, and the Batman seems to be a way for him to work through some of those issues that Wayne is dealing with in his own life. But he understands that the persona is limited, and it is just something that you're hiding behind, and it's going to prevent a full life in which you can help others. And so Wayne is not going to hide behind the Batman. He doesn't want to just do that. He wants to be a more complete person. It seems like a lot of this movie is Batman or Wayne trying to, understand his past, integrate his shadow, and at the very end, or near the very end of the movie, when all the city people are kind of in the flood and are needing help, we see a very symbolic act where he cuts the cord and he basically takes a dive into the baptismal waters for his own renewal, if you will. And it's basically Batman saying goodbye to who he has been and moving towards the path of the hero. And the path of the hero always has to go through the shadow. It always has to confront that shadow part of the person they are. And that is what allows a person to help others and to really stop making choices based on their own personal hurt and instead make choices that are of the benefit of the community. And we see Batman fall into the water, light the flame, and guide the helpless victims out into safety. And we're seeing how he's no longer being driven by his own selfish, unconscious drives, but now it's all about the greater good. And he's leading the others out of the darkness and into the light. And at the end of the film, we're seeing a different Batman. We're seeing a Batman who is rescuing the weak and helpless children of the city. And he's putting himself out there to not just focus on beating people down, but lifting people up. And amazing shot they have is when he puts this child down on the gurney, and it parallels earlier in the movie when the citizens were scared of him and everybody's kind of shying away from him. And this child instead is clinging to him and not wanting him to leave. And it just shows the path that he's going down and where he's come from, and that he's ready for that hero life as opposed to that selfish, unconsciously driven life. And it's a great shot. I love this take on the Batman. I'm looking forward to some sequels and seeing what they're gonna come out with to show the Batman continue go down that hero path. And so I think that's it for this video, the psychology of the Batman. Hope everybody likes this new format. I think I'm gonna try this out for a little bit, including on a couple Better Call Saul videos I'm planning to do in a couple weeks. So keep on the lookout for those. Thank you for watching.